Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Remember, when halfway through, you have to sit down, do a small one. Whenever you want, you can even do it towards the end.
Yeah.
No, it's okay.
I want to pray near the end. I'm praying near the end.
That's fine.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله هيا على الصلاة هيا على الصلاة هيا على الفلاح هيا على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. All praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We praise him. We ask him for guidance and forgiveness. We seek protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the malice of our own souls and the evil of our own actions. Whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides, no one can misguide. And whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes astray, no one can guide them back to the right path. I bear witness that there's no other deity but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by himself, no associate to him. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a slave messenger. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن الكريم بعد أنا أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر آمين يا رب العالمين. These are certainly very difficult times. They're strange times. They're challenging times for all of us. They're also very special times. We just went through a Ramadan for the first time, at least that I can remember since I was a child, where there was almost no interaction with anybody outside the family, immediate family. And we're seeing so much in the way of stress in the community around. Their personal stresses, the stresses in the environment around us. Some people are stressed about the elections coming up in 3 days. Others are concerned about this rising level of the pandemic. I'm glad to see everyone wearing masks here at the masjid. I hope everyone at home who's watching is also safely distanced and observing all the rules. But these are very difficult times. And at times like this, one wonders and one seeks back guidance to our deen for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's formula to deal with these kinds of stresses. We're seeing some very unusual events unfolding in Europe, very disconcerting, also very concerning. So how does one begin to deal with these kinds of stresses? What does one do to begin to respond as a human being, as a person, as a Muslim, as a husband, a wife, a child, mother, father? How does one begin to think about these things? And I would submit to you today that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has some beautiful hidayah for us in the Quran. And today I chose to at least focus on Surah Asr, which I personally found very helpful for myself. When I'm working as a physician in the hospital system, as a father, as a husband, there's some amazing guidance in Surah Asr. And it's a fascinating surah. It's surah number 103. I'm sure everyone in the room recites it frequently. But it's the second shortest surah of the Quran, revealed in the Meccan period. The language, the lugha of Surah Asr is very much off the Meccan period. It's brief. It's in the third person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses some very important facets in Surah Asr. So Surah Asr, by the way, is also linked to, the name Surah Asr is linked to Salatul Asr. We're going to pray today, as Brother Fester just mentioned, right after Jum'ah. So Asr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the first ayah of Surah Asr, He swears, the Almighty swears by Asr. Asr is, the notion of Asr is to be squeezed. The notion of time being squeezed. So Salatul Asr is actually salat that's squeezed between Dhuhr and Maghrib. And certainly as the clocks change, maybe this weekend if they do change, it's going to be even more squeezed, right? We can do Asr right after Dhuhr. So it's a squeezing of time. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by Asr when He says, Wal Asr, the intention is there's something really important about time. We have to pay attention to time. Something really important. And then the second ayah is the definition, is actually the extract of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about when He mentions Asr. The second ayah, Innal insana lafi khusr. The language is beautiful, lugha is beautiful. Innal insan, the emphasis on insan. So just think about the Meccan period. This is being revealed at a time when most of the audience is not Muslim, right? And the people addressed are insan, all mankind, all human beings. And it's a very important assertion. The assertion is kind of scary if you think about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that in reference to time from the first ayah, the second ayah, that indeed all mankind is in khasara, is in loss, is in deficit. Very bold statement, very scary statement. We are all at a loss. Now, that's a fascinating story. In the Mufassirun, there are many stories out there. I thought I'd adapt a story that I've read in my research to maybe our context, at least for our teenagers, maybe in the room or listening in. So if you think about how time is being lost, think about if you've ever been to Haymarket. At Haymarket, in the summer months, in fact, also in the winter months, the farmers come to sell their wares. Typically, it's perishable fruit and vegetables. So they come in on Friday, typically, to Haymarket. They stay overnight somewhere, and they sell all through Saturday, and they're pretty much done by Saturday, 4 or 5 p.m. Now, here's the khasara, here's the loss. The farmer picked the fruit from their farm, whenever they picked it. Maybe it was Thursday, maybe it was Friday. From the time the fruit is picked, the clock is ticking. The fruit is only perishing. So I was told by friends when I first came to Boston, you never go to Haymarket on Friday because fruit is very expensive on Friday. If you wait till Saturday, the prices are going down because there's loss happening. The farmer knows if they take the fruit back home, that fruit is going to perish and lose. So they sell their best vegetables on Friday. That's why I actually used to go on Friday, because you got the best fruit on Friday. You paid a little more, but it was still better. By the time goes by, time is ticking, the farmer is at a loss, can't avoid it, because the fruit is going to perish. And that's sort of the analogy I want to share with you about how time is running. It's running fast. Imagine this, that same watermelon you could have bought yesterday, spend more money. Today, that watermelon costs a little bit less. And by Saturday evening, they're giving away the fruit. That's the level of loss. So think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's emphasis on the notion of loss. In Latin, the term I grew up with was tempus fugit. Time's a fugitive. It's running away from us. So what is then, if that's the problem Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is presenting to us, What is the solution? And in the miracle of the Quran, as you know, the Quran is an incredible miracle. Just an aside, if you think about Ibrahim alayhi salam's mu'jiza, the miracle, he fell into a fire, thrown into fire, the fire cooled, right? Musa alayhi salam parted the sea, right? Isa alayhi salam brought something not living to life. Well, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's miracle is the Quran, right? That's why we have to become close to the Quran. So if you think about it, in the miracle of the Quran, the third ayah of Surah Asr really says it all. This is the solution I want to spend some time with you on today, next 10 minutes or so. How does one deal with this loss? And actually the same formula dealing with stress, the stress of what you're facing right now, personal stress, stress around you, the COVID pandemic. I'd suggest that this fabric, this formula I'm about to suggest to you, the last ayah, has some answers if you ponder how to deal with some of these stressors. So the ayah goes as follows. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Not or except those who have iman or in a safe place. There are a couple of meanings of amanu. They're in an amana, in a safe place, but they actually have iman, so they're in a safe place. They have iman. The question is iman in who? Iman in what? Well, the assertion is the iman in all the previous mentions in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about. Iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Himself. Iman in the Prophet, ﷺ, the books, the malaika, and so on and so forth. But iman is a basic prerequisite, right? الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, the people who believe in the unseen God, right? So that is the basic tenet of what we believe in. And then the formula goes on. What's the second thing? وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. So it's interesting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this notion of amal salih, but the way it's mentioned in Surah Asr, it's وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ in the past tense, as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is expecting us to do, it's past tense and it's plural. Many good deeds that my slaves are already doing. It's assumed that we've done them. Isn't that magical? That's fascinating. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has faith in us, the way we have faith in Him, in His entity, that we will be doing good things. So the first thing is you gotta have iman. Can't do without that. Second, you have to have good deeds. Now, we can go into good deeds, but Dr. Zuni gave a great talk last Friday, mashallah, on amal salih. And then the ayah goes on to say two more things. So iman, amal salih, and then watawasaw bil haqq. Very complicated translation, but the simple one is convincing others, persisting with others, advising others to the truth. And the last one is watawasaw bis sabr. And again, endearing other people and joining other people, convincing them towards what? Towards patience. A very crude definition of sabr is patience, but it's obviously much more complicated than that. So how does one actually break down this formula? How does one understand that I would submit to you today, this is a call to action? We're faced with, let's talk about the COVID pandemic for a second. How does Surah Asr help us in this time of the pandemic? Well, think about it for a second. You're talking about, you have to have iman on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever's happening is bi'idhnillah. We know all musibah, right? Surah Taghabun, ayah number 11, is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's bi'idhnillah. And there is no secret. There's no doubt that this is a very targeted musibah. It's a very, very extremely, very specific. In fact, musibah, the word musibah comes from the root word asab. Asaba means an arrow that hits the target. So musibah is a very targeted, extremely specific event. And you can argue COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 infections are extremely targeted. So, you're talking about a situation where you have to have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whatever's happening is happening for a reason. And you have to have faith also in the truth, in the news that's true, the facts, right? What about amal salih? How does one actually define that? Well, in the COVID pandemic situation, I'd plead with you as a physician, as a community member, that we have to do the right thing. So if someone's saying, don't wear a mask, when everybody, all the authorities are telling us to wear a mask, the CDC is telling us to wear a mask, what we must do is wear a mask. I'm not wearing a mask right now because I'm distanced away from everybody right now. But otherwise, we all should be wearing masks. We should be distancing ourselves. We should be washing our hands, doing the right thing as is recommended. That is amal salih. And that would be ibadah in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's definition, because we're following the rules of what we should be doing to protect each other. But what about watawasaw bil haqq? What about truth? Same thing, we endear people to the truth. We want everybody to understand this is the truth about COVID-19. And what about watawasaw bis sabr? Well, you know, things are going to happen. There are people in this room who've lost family members. Some of you actually have been through the infection of SARS-CoV-2. Most of you know people who may have had trouble with the disease or passed away from it, or someone you know may have passed away from it. It's an incredibly tall order. Give you some numbers, give sense from some numbers. We have lost almost 3 times the number of people in the United States than we lost in the Vietnam War over more than a decade. And we've lost them in less than a year. That's the magnitude. So how does one endear someone to patients? Well, we'll talk about that a little bit. We're going to unpack this a little bit. But I just wanted you to think about, next few minutes, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Asr give us this sequence of Iman first, and then doing good deeds, and then advising people, endearing them to, come together in haqq, in the truth. And then, why is that sequence? There's no accident to that sequence. There are some really incredible thoughts the Mufassirun have had. I'm sure you can come up with a few as well, if this was an interactive session, which this is not, about why the sequence is such. Well, you can't have anything without Iman. But what's really interesting, I'll give you some, at least my observations and some from my research that at least I did preparing for today. The first two, so Iman and Amal Salih, is really us. It's me, myself, and I. It's you. The Iman is yourself, within yourself. And the good deeds have to come from you directly. So you could, in your own microcosm, achieve the first two. But I would suggest that the second two, you cannot achieve on your own. In fact, you will be doing disservice to try and achieve them on your own. You cannot, because to endure someone, to entreat someone, to convince someone, to advise someone toward the truth, you have to have a second party involved. Same thing with sabr. To entreat someone, to suggest that someone should have patience, you need to have a second party involved. And that is why our deen is so beautiful. The first two attributes of Surah Asr, the recommendations, are really personal. You can internalize them. They're really meant for you personally. The second two are really based on our civic duty. So our deen is not about living in a microcosm and doing it just for me, myself, and I. There's a lot of community service. Think about it for a second. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not telling us about, not saying Muslimin are in loss. Not saying mu'mineen are in loss. It's saying kullu insan, all human beings are in loss. So the context of this ayah and the surah, the rest of the surah, is all mankind. So when you do civic duty, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, it does not mean you should be working only amongst the Muslim community. We should be working in the community at large. This is our civic duty. What does that mean? What does that civic sense mean? How does one actually achieve that? How does one accomplish that? Well, we talked about COVID a little bit, but it could be something as simple as when you came to park today, you made sure, even though you couldn't see in the snow, you parked between lines so you got a parking spot and you didn't impinge on 2 parking spots, for example. Or when you came in, you brought a prayer mat so you could say your salah on a prayer mat. If you didn't, we provided one so it was safe for you and safe for people following you. And you all washed your hands and you wore your mask. So that is your civic sense. If you saw a piece of trash somewhere, you picked up a piece of trash, put it into a trash bin. So that's our civic sense. But we have a huge responsibility to the community around us in Surah Asr in the last 2 parts. And think about it for a second. Out of 4 attributes or 4 tasks or 4 recommendations Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us to get us out of the loss, just coming back to the loss, the 4 pieces, half of them is personal, and exactly half of them are not. They are community responsibilities. So no one can argue that the community is less than yourself. You know, I'd argue they're equal, right? Now, the other interesting thing is, if you think about community spirit, community sense, what's really, really fascinating is, and I'll just end with a couple more points. Psychiatrists, psychologists will tell you at times of stress, at times of loss, whether it's loss of time, loss of life, loss of wealth, loss of dear ones, one of the things that brings happiness or relief is giving. Giving begets happiness. Whether you give time, you give charity, there are many mentions in the Quran of giving, but ideally you want to give from what you love, because when you give from what you love, that's really valuable. It increases your spirituality. So again, I want to just emphasize, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ is talking about giving. You're now giving of yourself as an ambassador, right, of enduring people to the truth and to sabr. Just want to mention a couple of things about, what do we mean by sabr? Because I think that is, I just want to end with some thoughts there with you. Sabr is a very, very complicated word, has a lot of connotations. So I don't have time to go into it today. I'm just beginning to understand it myself personally. And it's going to be a long journey next few years, I'm sure, just trying to understand that word sabr. But Ibn al-Qayyum mentions that there are at least 3 types of patience of sabr, or at least the act of sabr, which is the actuation of iman. So if you have iman and you're trying to manifest the iman in sabr, what are the actuators? What are the manifestations? Well, the first one is, to be patient when you're performing your obligations, the basic obligations of what we should be doing and building our iman and deen on, aqam as-salah and zakah and all our pillars. And then when you get to the next level, after you do what you should be doing, then you have to avoid what you shouldn't be doing. That's part of sabr. So there's the to do, and then there's the not to do. And some would argue the not to do is equally important, or probably more important, which is abstaining from the bad things. Don't lie, cheat, or steal. All the conventional things that a good human being wouldn't do. And finally, probably the most important part, which we normally call patience, is having sabr on manifesting your iman in sabr when you're in times of hardship, when you're in times of distress, when you're in times of difficulty. So I'll stop here and we'll carry on, just summarize in a few minutes. In the second part of Khutba. أقول هذا وأستغفر لكم. السلام عليكم إنه غفور رحيم. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So just wanted to leave you with a couple of parting thoughts here, that as we think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's formula, or his recommendation, or his advice to us in the Quran on how to handle loss. It could be time, could be anything else. We have some incredible opportunities. And I suggest that this is a call to action for all of us, that we need to do more by following the recommendations of Surah Asr. There's a famous hadith when the Sahaba would actually say goodbye to one another and bid each other farewell on a journey, or they would greet each other. After salam, they would actually recite Surah Asr. So they would recite Surah Asr to remind each other of the loss we're facing and how to overcome that loss. Many Mufassirun have commented on the advantage of Surah Asr. Some have suggested that the squeeze of time is actually analogous to the squeezed version of Surah Asr being the essence of the Quran and the recommendation of the Quran, ayat Surah Asr, because Surah Asr really actuates in action what we should be doing across the board. So we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala But make dua short, dua, and I'll give you a few seconds to make a private dua as well, inshallah. We pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst the people of Surah Asr. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the best in this world and the best in the world hereafter, and save us from your punishment. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, please do not let our hearts be misguided after you've guided them. I'll give you a few seconds for your private dua, inshallah. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون وأقيموا الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله